The Allen Line Company appreciates all of the dedicated carriers it takes to move loads across the U.S. Stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
People get into trucking in many different ways, and for some, it's the military that opens the door. As part of this week's Mission Military Appreciation, we'll talk with one of those truckers, OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh. To take part in Mission Military Appreciation, just go to ooida.com and click on Become a Member. You can join or renew your membership for a discounted rate, and 10% of that will go into the Truckers for Troops Fund, with OOIDA matching that money. Also on today's show, you may think what happens in your personal vehicle stays on your personal record, but it can impact your CDL as well. We sit down with Trina Skywalker and Lisa Waskey of OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department. And finally, truckers are calling OOIDA and posting on social media about a new trend. Shippers and others requiring those truckers to download a specific app on their smartphones. I'll discuss that and more with OOIDA's Doug Morris. But first, the news with Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Mark. May is National Military Appreciation Month, and over the next 2 weeks, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association is doing a campaign to raise money for veterans and active military members called Mission Military Appreciation. During the 2-week event, people can join the association or renew their membership for a discounted price of $35, a savings of $10 off the regular yearly dues, with 10% of that money going towards Truckers for Troops. OOIDA will match 10% of the money raised by its members. The Truckers for Troops campaign began back in 2007 and has since raised more than $800,000 to go toward care packages and veterans' causes. For more information or to participate, you can call OOIDA at 816-229-5791 or visit ooida.com and click on Truckers for Troops under the menu tab. Over the next 2 weeks, you'll hear military-related stories on Landline Now, including today, when OOIDA's Executive Vice President Louis Pugh shares how he got into the Army.
Oh, I guess it's something I always wanted to do, expected to do, followed to do. You know, my grandfather and his family's all the way back's been in the military for a long time, so we have a family history, I guess you could say, of that. And it's just something that I felt like and was sort of raised that's what you do. When you get to a certain age, you go to the military. I did it. My baby brothers did it, so it's just sort of a family thing, I guess you would say.
Louis will share more of his story on how he started driving a truck in the Army, which led to a career in trucking. That's coming up later in our show. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is putting a spotlight on safe driving around large trucks this week. Our Roads, Our Safety Week kicked off yesterday and will continue through Saturday. This annual campaign is aimed at educating all drivers on sharing the roads safely with large trucks and buses. In 2022, nearly 6,000 people were reportedly killed in crashes that involved large trucks. However, the fault of the accident isn't considered in those numbers. In 2021, FMCSA revealed that more than 90% of truckers involved in fatal crashes did not receive a moving violation. During this week, FMCSA will spotlight a key road user each day of the week and give various resources, tips, and reminders that can help them share the road safely. The 42nd annual Super Rigs is right around the corner. This year's event is happening at the Texas Motor Speedway in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Julie Wright is the brand and media manager for Shell Rotella. She says there are a lot of exciting things planned for this year's event.
We've got the awards, of course, that we're giving out, choosing the 12 drivers that will be part of the 2025 Rotella Super Rigs calendar is always a thrilling experience for all those drivers that are chosen to be part of it. We'll have the light show, of course, fireworks, and great family opportunity to come out, enjoy the big rigs, celebrate the working truckers, and enjoy some time with the community.
For more information, you can visit Rotella.com and click on the Super Rigs banner at the top. This year's event starts on May 30th and goes until June 1st. A truck driver in Utah is accused of killing a police officer during a traffic stop over the weekend. ABC News reports that a Santa Quin police officer and a Utah Highway Patrol trooper stopped a semi-trailer around 6:30 a.m. after a 911 call came in that a person was standing on the back of the truck as it was driving north on Interstate 15. During the stop, the truck driver allegedly drove off, turned the truck around, and began driving the wrong way on the interstate. The truck then crashed into the two officers' cars, killing the Santa Quin officer. The truck driver has been identified as 41-year-old Michael Aaron Jane. Jane allegedly fled on foot after the crash and stole vehicles. He was arrested late Sunday following a chase. The investigation into the incident continues, including about who was riding on the back of the truck and why. An Illinois senator has proposed a bill that would generate $38 million for local road repairs, but there's a catch. It's the truckers who will pay. According to Shaw Local News Network, Democratic State Senator Rachel Ventura from Joliet proposed a bill in the Senate that would allow municipalities and counties to impose fees on semi-trailers carrying goods from an intermodal yard. The fees would range from 50 cents to $8 per semi-trailer. Ventura was quoted saying that her district has the highest amount of truck traffic around any intermodal in the entire state. A $1.45 billion transportation levy proposal has been unveiled by Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell. According to Fox 13, the plan would fund bridge repairs, modernizations, and other projects over the next 8 years. Since it's a levy, the responsibility would be on property owners to pay. If passed, the average homeowner would go from paying $24 a month to $41 a month, something Mayor Harrell says he's confident voters will do.
We think we've tendered a smart package to the voters. The point of the outreach is to make sure we are aligned with what they want. So we think we are tendering a proposal that the voters will approve. We also have discussions with people on fixed income, people that realize that they're struggling to still buy a loaf of bread in the city. And so we try to calibrate the need for someone that is still worried about their financial situation, calibrating that against the need for the system we have to be the city we want it to be.
The proposal will now be reviewed by the Seattle City Council, and it could be on the November ballot for voters. Nearly $41 million has been announced for traffic safety projects in Ohio. Governor Mike DeWine recently announced $40.9 million in funding for 27 new traffic safety projects. DeWine said these projects are engineered to keep everyone safe in an effort to protect pedestrians and prevent roadway departures. In a press release, roadway departures were said to be the top factor in fatal crashes, accounting for more than half of all traffic deaths in Ohio each year. In 2023, 615 people died in roadway departure crashes, and 150 people died in pedestrian-involved crashes. Some of the safety projects will include widening roadway shoulders, moving ditches, and clearing trees, along with other obstacles further from the road. And finally, alcohol isn't believed to be the cause of a recent crash in Wisconsin, but it was a casualty. UPI reports that a truck hauling cases of Miller High Life beer crashed on Interstate 41 last week, causing beer to spill all over the road. Police had to shut down 2 lanes of traffic to clean up the spill, and motorists were told to seek an alternate route or expect delays. The driver of the truck was treated for minor injuries. The investigation into the crash continues. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. Next, I'll discuss getting into trucking by way of the military with OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh. We'll be back in just a moment with more. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
Get the most power and performance out of your rig with Howe's Diesel Defender. It provides maximum lubricity and contains specialized IDX4 detergent to clean and prevent deposits and safely removes harmful water. Visit HowesProducts.com for more information.
Attention professional drivers, do you owe money to the IRS? Integrity Tax Relief Group frees drivers from IRS trouble. Call for help now, 855-976-4291. That's 855-976-4291.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now. Welcome back. People get into trucking in many different ways. Some are generational, raised by trucking parents and growing up on stories from trucking grandparents, ready to drive by the time they hit 21. Some have simply always loved trucks, ever since they were kids, even with no truckers in the family. Some spend an entire career in another field entirely, but hear the call of the open road later in life. And then there are those who find trucking as part of a career in the military, eventually turning it into their post-military civilian occupation. Today is the beginning of something we're calling Mission Military Appreciation. It's done in conjunction with Military Appreciation Month and is part of OOIDA's Truckers for Troops program, raising money to send care packages to our troops overseas and now to help veterans who have come home through the Veterans Community Project. So we're taking a look at trucking and the military, and we're starting by talking with one of those truckers who started in our armed forces, OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh. Louis, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So you served in the Army. Tell us a little bit about your service. I mean, how did you decide to get into the military?
Oh, I guess it's something I always wanted to do, expected to do, followed to do. You know, my grandfather and his family's all the way back's been in the military for a long time, so we have a family history, I guess you could say, of that. And then it's just something that I felt like and was sort of raised that that's what you do when you get to a certain age. You go to the military. I did it. My baby brothers did it. So it's just sort of a family thing, I guess you would say.
So how did you end up driving a truck in the military? Was this just something you were assigned or that you volunteered for?
No, you could, of course, you take a test and they tell you when you pass your test and how you score, what all you can be in. And I guess you have what jobs a whole bunch of jobs you could choose in your ASVAB at the time I was in. I assume it's still the same, but I guess I don't know. But with that being said, I went in wanting to be a truck driver because, I guess as you said, people come into trucking from different ways and different ideas. I came into trucking sort of a lot of those that you covered. My dad drove a truck. My grandfather's, one grandfather drove a truck for a little while in Oregon before he was going to college and stuff like that. My other grandfather drove truck through the Depression and then drove milk truck on and off as a farmer. And then we had a farm and had trucks. And so I always loved trucks. And of course, I always say, which I still say is true to this day, I saw Smokey and the Bandit at the movie theater, and that made me want to be a truck driver as a little guy. So all those things. And so it just was sort of a natural thing, I guess, when I went into the military. I wanted to be a helicopter pilot, to be perfectly honest with you, and fly Apaches. And I tested well enough that I could do that. And my eyesight and all that stuff was good enough. But when I did my physical and went to the job part of, as you're joining the military, and told them that I wanted to be a chopper pilot, they started explaining to me, have 30-some weeks of this training and 30-some weeks of this training and this is Valentine's Day of my senior year of high school. So I'm getting out of high school. And they're talking about all this schooling and stuff that I have to training and how much long to become a chopper pilot. And I was thinking to myself, I've just gotten out of 12. I'm just finishing up 12 years of school. The last thing I want is more school because school wasn't always my favorite thing. I liked my vocational school, but as far as regular school, I wasn't big on it. But with that being said, they're telling me all this stuff. And this counselor lady, I remember she goes through all this stuff. And I said, well, how long do you have to go to school to drive a truck in the Army? Because I kind of like to do that maybe too. And she said, well, that's 6 weeks. And I said, sign me up as a truck driver. So that's how I became a truck driver, because like I said, I always wanted to go into trucking. I always loved trucks, and of course I drove trucks on a farm a little bit, and had the trucking background. That was, I guess, my calling. But when I went to the military, like I said, I really thought it'd be cool to be a chopper pilot till they started telling me. Now that I'm 50 years old and look back on life, that school really wasn't that long, but when you're 18 years old and can't wait to get out of high school and go on with life, because I actually left for basic training the day after I graduated. So the day after my graduation, I left for basic training. So I was ready to, even in February at that time, I was ready to be done with high school and go on with the world.
So what are some of the places you were deployed as a trucker? I mean, where did you do this?
I was fortunate, lucky person, never left the good old United States of America. So knock on wood, we were deployed for Somalia when all that happened. And a few days before our deployment to leave is when the unfortunate stuff happened with the Black Hawk helicopter over there. And then everything got frozen, and we never went. But I was fortunate here, served some active duty time, and then reserve time. I finished out in reserves in my hometown. It was great. And so, yeah. But fortunately, like I said, I was very fortunate because I got into the military. I graduated high school right after Desert Storm. And so really there wasn't a lot of conflicts in the time that I served. So, like I said, I was very fortunate.
And a lot of time before we had another conflict.
And yeah, a long time before we had another. Yep, exactly.
What sort of things did you haul? I mean, trucking in the military, I think, could cover a whole host of things, but what particularly was your specialty?
I mean, two things. I was a heavy truck unit originally, 911s. We hauled tanks and stuff like that, and then we switched. And then I was a fuel haul unit, line haul unit, hauled fuel, or diesel fuel, stuff like that. We had like Freightliner tractors, and we got new 915s. They were Freightliners, and I think they were 7,000 gallon fuel tanks or something like that. And hauled fuel here in the States, we hauled some fuel for the Navy and for the Air Force and stuff like that.
So talk a little bit about the vehicles you drove, because it sounds like these were truly big rigs. I mean, these weren't smaller trucks like you sometimes see. Talk a little bit about them and how they compare to commercial trucks.
Yeah, the 911s were huge, of course. They're huge, and they haul an Army tank. And I had the old 9, when I was in, we had the old 911s. The new ones are pretty cool. They're a lot nicer, I should say. I mean, ours were neat too, the heads. And so we had those and hauled tanks, and we had a big multi-axle, like gooseneck type trailer. And then when they're like 50-ton winch, so you could pull the tank up on there if it was disabled. And then with fuel tanker units, those trucks were pretty much like a commercial truck. They weren't a 6x6 type truck at all. They had a Detroit Series 60 Detroit engine in them, and where the old ones had the old Detroits, and they had a automatic transmission was doing anything, but they were just pretty much like a road tractor. The interior of them, I mean, of course they had vinyl floor mats, but the interior was just like a Freightliner day cab. In fact, the first semi I bought, my FLD 120, because that's what they were FLDs 120. It was pretty much the same truck, other than I had a Cummins and it had a Detroit. But as far as the dash and all that stuff, they were pretty much the same. And mine had a sleeper, but other than that, they were pretty much the same truck.
Wow. So you really did have a nice transition from one to the other.
Yeah, exactly. So, but like I said, that was the line on. Those trucks weren't meant for off-road or anything like that. They were to pick up fuel at a port or a fuel station and take it out, not necessarily to the front line, but to the front line fuel stations.
I'm wondering, you hear about different positions people have within the Army, different duties they have, and the relative difficulty of one versus another. I mean, you mentioned all the training to fly a helicopter, for example. How would you say that trekking compares to some of the other things people do in the military? Is it better? Is it worse? Give us an idea.
Oh, I thought trucking in the Army was great. I loved it. And if you like to drive and stuff, and of course, I had the love of trucks. I don't know. I guess if you have a passion for something, it's always fun. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the training, because training for trucking in the military I went to Fort Leonard Wood, and they had you started out in 5 tons and deuce and ass in 5 tons, and you drove around on these obstacle courses and through the mud and over the hills. And being a hillbilly from southeastern Ohio, that was that's just second nature to go mudding. So it was fun to go mudding in them great big 6x6 trucks, and you'd go out at night and do blackout drive and wear the night vision goggles and all that kind of stuff. So that was always fun. I like that stuff. But in trucking and training in the military, you do a lot of range stuff that people don't really think about. Like, you learn for ambushes, and if they ambush your convoys and different kinds of stuff like that, and how to handle that and drive through those type of situations and hot zones and stuff like that.
Well, you mentioned that training, for example, what to do when you're dealing with an ambush or something like that. And obviously the military has to train you for some very dangerous and difficult situations. How do you think that type of training helped you when you did make the transition to commercial trucking?
Well, trucking in the Army is a lot different than trucking commercially in some aspects. Of course, the operation of the vehicle and the mechanics of that, and that's all the same. But you ride a convoy a lot. Yeah, you're with other people a lot more than what you are like when you're out there by yourself in a truck. But it's still different. I think the military, where it helped me, is I drove enough, and I volunteered for anything I could to go somewhere, because I like to drive and stuff. And then as time went on, I was a lead driver and squad leader for my company. But with that being, or my platoon, excuse me. But with that being said, you just had more confidence. I felt more confidence when I went around. I mean, I had my CDL when I turned 21 that I'd, from my military training, and I felt confident, probably a lot more confident than others, because I started at the folks with the big orange trucks, because at the time you either drove an orange truck or a yellow truck when you were 21, or whatever color the JB Hunt trucks are. And I went with orange. And but with that being said, you had to go to a training thing for a couple weeks. I already had my CDL, so I didn't have to do a lot of stuff the other people, but it's just I felt more confident than the other people. There's a lot of stuff. I think that helped. I think trucking not trucking, I'm sorry, but the military as a whole, the greatest thing I came away with, and I think anybody comes away with, is diversity, and you get with people and learning the differences in people and cultures, because America's a great country. We're all the same, and we all follow the same flag and salute the same flag, but we're all different. I mean, it's a lot different where I'm from in southeastern Ohio, even than what it is in Columbus, Ohio, or Cleveland, or, just in our state, there's so much diversity. And, so, I was fortunate enough to go on vacations and stuff as a kid. I was lucky to have my family and stuff, but still, we never really left our world, I guess you say. When you're thrown in with 60 other people from all over the United States, and you got to learn to get along, accomplish one mission, you learn how to get along with people and how to deal with people. And I think that was the greatest lesson. I wish that more people would have that today, and not getting on a soapbox, but I really wish people would be that way more, because everybody's mad at everybody about everything right now on social media, and hey, and you forgot to remember where people come from. We're not all the same, and it doesn't make them right, it doesn't make them wrong, but we're all a product of where we were raised and where we are, and you go through that, and that's a good thing, and you shouldn't forget where you come from, but we can always improve. And sometimes you ought to give people the benefit of the doubt. They're not being mean or being bad, they're just it's just what they're saying. So, and again, that's my soapbox, but that's the greatest thing I think I got from the military, was just that learning to understand and relate and get along with other people. Even though we may look at things from a different angle, we can still put our heads together and accomplish that mission.
Excellent. Well, Louis, thank you very much for telling us about this. It's been very interesting.
It was my pleasure. And next time we do this, I have a great story about being a truck driver when I was in basic training that we can share.
We'll definitely do that. I've been talking with OOIDA Executive Vice President Louis Pugh about his experience driving a truck in the U.S. Army and how it led to his career behind the wheel of a commercial motor vehicle. Once again, all this week, we are celebrating Mission Military Appreciation and raising money for the Truckers for Troops program to support our troops and veterans. If you want to take part, you can join OOIDA or renew your membership for a discounted rate. 10% of that will go into the fund. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Landline Now, welcome back. Like tires, fuel, and an engine, insurance is one of those things you just have to have for your truck. But not all insurance is created equal. Ashley Blackford is here with the experts from OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department to answer some questions.
Thanks, Mark, and hello to Trina Skywalker and Lisa Waske with OOIDA's Insurance Department. How are you doing today, ladies?
Good.
Great.
I first want to say we have a new voice here for our insurance segment that you'll be hearing over the next few months. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, you have been working at OOIDA for quite some time now. We have a little kind of, what do you call it, Rolodex? Probably not.
Kind of.
Modern day Rolodex.
Yeah.
We can see when people started, and you started in 96.
Yes.
And I started kindergarten in 96. So you've been here for a minute, but you'd never know it. You'd never know it.
Thank you.
Talk to me about what it is you do here.
I am the supervisor of our truck support department. We support the agents and help them process files.
All right. So today's topic, we will dive right in about driving records, more specifically personal driving records. What would you ladies say would be the biggest question you get when it comes to people's personal driving record?
Well, I think one of the questions we get most often is just questioning why a violation or an accident in their personal vehicle counts against their insurance rate for commercial coverage. And we do have to explain it's all the same license. You know, the CDL is an endorsement on that license. And, it all counts. The insurance companies are going to look at it, whether it's personal or commercial.
Are people usually surprised about that it is an endorsement, it's not just a separate license?
Yeah, they think that it should be separate. They feel like what they do in their personal vehicle shouldn't count commercially, even though it's a reflection on how they drive.
Now, when could a violation impact your commercial insurance?
I think it will any time. If we run a driving record and there's a violation, the underwriters are going to look at it. Whether, like I said, whether it's personal or commercial, and like Lisa said, it's still a reflection to the underwriters on you as a driver. And we don't mean that in a negative manner, like we're full of judgment, because I've had my fair share of tickets in a personal vehicle. But, they do. We have actuaries that look at studies. They look at statistics, and statistically, if you're getting these violations in a personal vehicle, it's just as likely for you to get them in a commercial vehicle.
Now, even if someone calls and pleads and says, I won't speed when I'm behind the wheel of a truck, but when I'm, in my Corolla, it's a different story. But that doesn't matter, right?
Right. They always are going to look at it regardless.
Now, I kind of want to dive into that a little bit more, from an insurance standpoint. Why is it so concerning? And if you have any examples, of someone's driving record who say they do have a lead foot in their personal vehicle, why could that then translate into when they have 80,000 pounds behind them?
Well, I'll say too, I do know people who drive differently in a tractor trailer situation than they do in a personal vehicle. So, it's not to say that we don't think people are going to take any extra caution when they have 80,000 pounds, of weight versus the weight of a personal vehicle. But it still does all go back to the statistics and the studies that show that it's just a more risky situation, I guess is the best way to put it. Anytime the underwriters are reviewing a quote, they're essentially taking a bet, on whether or not they're going to have to pay $1 million for an accident. So
$1 million, that's a lot to consider.
That's a big bet. Yeah, for sure. Now, what about speeding tickets? I know, Trina, you had mentioned you had a few back in your
Not
day.
for a long time.
Not for a long time.
No,
All right, we'll
changed.
clarify that.
Last week.
Say you did have a few speeding tickets from, way back in the day. Can those impact your rates and coverage in the future?
Most companies typically look at the last 3 to 5 years. So, if it has been past that, they don't look at it as closely. But if they do see a pattern, if they see this and this and this over the last even 10 years, they might consider not writing you or increasing the premiums.
Now, what about when it comes to a DUI?
Some insurance companies go back a little further for that. And I would say that's more likely to impact your insurance if it's pattern type behavior. So we've seen them where maybe it hasn't happened in the last 10 years, it has fallen off your record or has just freshly fallen off your record. But if we see that there were 3 or 4 before that, they're really going to take a harder look at the entire risk. They're probably going to look at your employment history. Sometimes they might just put you on like a probationary status where they run your driving record more often than they normally would or something of that nature. It all just depends.
And so when you say, and of course every insurance company is different, but when they look back 3 to 5 years, that's the 3 to 5 years that count. But do some insurance companies look at the, 10, 15 years, I don't know how far back you can go, just so they're aware of the patterns?
And that can vary from state to state because some driving records will show you only 3 years. Some will show you the entire history. So I think it just depends on what they can get.
Okay.
It is funny when you run into a state that really doesn't have a cap on how far back they go and you're seeing violations from like 1978. You're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
let it go.
Yeah, exactly. Why are we holding on to the past here?
Yeah.
How often do rates increase or how often can they increase?
Typically at your renewal, if you see a rate change, or they can within your underwriting period. And every state is different. One state might be 30, you might have 45 or 60 days. If they find something within that underwriting period that can hurt or drastically change, they will change the premiums.
Now, one thing can increase. Can you run the risk of also having your policy terminated?
Definitely.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've seen the situations where, especially with accidents, I'm not saying it would never happen over like speeding tickets, but say we're doing the quote, you ask someone, have you had any tickets or accidents? They say no. You run the driving record and you see a speeding ticket, then you're probably looking at a little bit of a rate increase. But if we find that there was an accident with a large payout, regardless of the details, usually, and we've had that happen before, they'll say no tickets or accidents, and we find out that 2 years ago there was an accident with a $100,000 payout. I mean, that's probably going to result in your policy getting canceled. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was curious. How often, do people call looking for a quote and they're like, no, driving record's clean, I'm great. And then you look and you're like, this tells different.
It happens more often than not, but some of them, they don't remember or they don't think that it impacts. Especially depending on the accident and the details. You hit a deer. They don't think that counts, but we see that. We look at that.
Well, and especially like going back to the original topic, sometimes that's what we get too. We'll say, well, we found out that there was an accident a year ago, and they'll say, well, that happened in my car. And then we find ourselves explaining that it doesn't matter, what you were in. We still have to take it to the underwriters.
Now, when it comes to not at fault accidents, I assume a lot of people think, well, that shouldn't matter. That shouldn't count towards me.
Ideally.
Ideally. What is kind of the consensus there? And do people often think, don't need to mention that because it wasn't my fault?
And they do, just like kind of going back to the deer strike. They think, wasn't my fault. The deer ran in front of me or somebody hit them and left the scene. That happens more often than not. You're parked at a truck stop and spaces are so small, somebody pulls out and hits you, but they just think that those shouldn't count, even though they do.
They do. And, if you have one incident like that, it's not going to count the same as an at fault, or a preventable or something like that. They don't necessarily look at it the same, but it still goes back into assessing the overall risk, and everything's a factor when you're assessing the risk. So,
especially if you have multiple, if you have 2 or 3 not at faults, they really take that into consideration too, because what's on the other end? I mean, are you not driving defensively enough? Are you, not causing them, but not preventing them?
Well, and unfortunately, we've seen those situations. I was doing a quote one time, and the caller said that they were giving me the details of a not at fault incident, and it was, they were considered at fault because someone cut them off, and then they rear-ended them. But then they later found out, I guess that same person did it to a judge and found out that it was a scheme on the other party's part. They would do that intentionally to get the insurance payout.
Wow. And I know you guys have heard of that before, which is
sure,
wild.
It is to me too. Like,
that's a gamble.
I don't want my car or my body. I don't want my person to be injured.
Especially an 80,000-pound vehicle.
Right.
It's insane.
Yeah. Why is it so important that when people call in for a quote that they be upfront about their driving record?
Well, because it's going to affect your rate. We have those people that call in and who say, nope, I'm clean, everything's clear. We get, work history back, or we get their driving record back, and they have several violations, which is going to change their rate. And then they're completely upset, not realizing that had they been upfront, that's what their rate would have been to start with.
Right.
So they're...
And if I'm being honest, it stinks to make that call. On the insurance side, you don't ever want to call anyone. I mean, I guess some might if they're commission based. They may not care as much. But I know here, no one likes to make that call. It's not going to be a happy call. The customer's going to be upset. No one wants to say, hey, you're paying $100 more a month. It's not good for anyone.
Are people sometimes, do they think, when they just call the agent and they give their history or their driving record, work history, that it kind of just stops there with that person? There is more of a process of a little bit of digging and whatnot. Right?
Yeah, we call those companies, that have been within the last 3 years. We call them and we verify with them what type of, freight they hauled, radius that they traveled, if they had any accidents or claims or incidents, and verify it.
Is it fair to say it's more of a red flag if somebody doesn't disclose all that information and you have to find it out kind of on your own?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I think some folks legitimately forget,
Right.
if it's a small incident and they think it was over 3 years old and maybe it's just close to, you have those situations where you can tell it wasn't intentionally being kept from you. But then we've had the ones too where they say they're clean and we call and the motor carrier's like, no, they had an $80,000 accident. We're like, oh, gosh.
Yes. Not something you'd probably quickly forget.
I wouldn't imagine.
You wouldn't think, no. What questions should drivers who are calling for a quote expect to be asked, when it comes to the agent asking about their driving record and history?
Well, we try to ask, I think, in the most obvious way. Some people would just say, have you had any tickets or accidents? And so they think, no, I haven't had an accident, but you have the incident, you hit a light pole barely, or the deer strike. They think that it's not something you have to foreclose. So you try to say, have you had any tickets, any accidents, any violations, whether personal, whether commercial, in the last 3 years. So you try to ask it in the most obvious way possible.
Yeah, and if you have had a ticket or an accident, my advice would just be asking the agent, how long is this going to, stay on for insurance purposes? When can I expect to see the rate go back down? They're not always going to have an immediate answer for that, because there's a chance, too, that something else could happen in that time frame and keep the rate up. But, they're good questions to ask.
All right. Ladies, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our thanks to Trina Skywalker and Lisa Waskey of OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department. If you have any questions about insurance, you can call 816-229-5791. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. We'll be back after this.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine ViberTech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with ViberTech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. We're starting to get calls from truckers and see notes on social media about a growing problem. Shippers, brokers, and other entities that truckers deal with are asking those truckers to download apps onto their phones before taking a load. So why is this something that's a concern? Here to discuss that and more is OOIDA's Doug Morris. Doug, how are you doing?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Very well. So what sort of apps are we talking about? What's the function that these apps are giving to shippers and others?
So it's a wide variety. Some are just tracking the driver from point A to point B. Some are actually asking drivers to provide their ELD information, their login information, so they can log in remotely. Some are, putting sensors in the trailers to, monitor the temperatures if they're hauling a perishable load. There's a whole bunch of different apps that they're using, these companies, and I know a lot of drivers are worried about it, and I would be too. I mean, but if they read their contracts and they sign the contract and says that you will download this app and abide by the circumstances of the contract, and there's really no recourse for them. I mean, they need to read these contracts. They need to look at them and say, hey, what's this app? What's this app going to do? And then when they download it, look at to see what the app's your permissions are. Go to the settings of the app and see what you're actually permitting that app to do to your phone. A lot of times it'll be to the point where they can actually pull your cell phone calls or your cell phone pictures. So I mean, a lot of these things can be very intrusive. But if you sign a contract and you agree to it, that's your fault.
And I'm kind of wanting to discuss some of the concerns here, Doug, and you've listed some of them. But the first thing that came to my mind, especially when you said ELDs or when you talk about phone data and getting access to other things, is cybersecurity, which is already a big issue. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't this really significantly increase the cybersecurity concerns?
Yeah, absolutely. If once someone can go into your system, you don't know back end if their systems are corrupt or if they're secure or not, and you don't know at what point later would they'll be able to get into your system if they want to. I mean, like I said, these contracts are very vague, and sometimes allow these companies to get into your system anytime you want, even though that you may not be hauling for them. So a lot of times I would suggest if they did have that download one of these apps, is afterwards just uninstall it. A lot of folks still keep them in there, and it just a situation where they can get into your system anytime you want because you sign a contract that basically allows them to do that. So it's a bad situation, and you're right. They can be hacked in remotely, a lot of these things, and you never know what's going to happen.
Well, and of course, there's a privacy issue here as well, I would think, especially when you're talking about getting access to other things on the phone that are probably not related to the loads.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, when you download that app, you'll see something permissions, and it's all fine print, and it might be several pages. You'll just go ahead and accept it, and you have no clue what you're accepting. But the fact of the matter is, you've accepted the fact that they're able to do this. They can go through your cell phone at will, and if you do it, it's your own fault. I mean, you need to figure it out. You need to do due diligence and figure out what's in that contract and what the app actually does. Because, like I said, these apps can do all kind of things, and they can just be very intrusive. They can, actually listen to your conversations. They can do all kind of things, and again, law wise, I mean, if you sign permission to do it, there's really not a lot law wise can be done.
I want to talk a little bit about options, and you mentioned that truckers need to keep an eye on these contracts. Let's say they get a contract for carrying a load, and it's got one of these clauses in it calling for them to download an app. If they sign that contract, do they have any options? Can they simply mark out that part of the contract? What are the options there?
Yeah, if I saw this contract, I wouldn't necessarily take the option where I could have to download the app. But again, a lot of these folks will if you don't download the app, then obviously you're not going to get the load. So when you download the app, look for the permissions, like permissions to set in cookies, the permissions to monitor your look at your data from your contacts, your data from your pictures and all that. You can restrict a lot of those things if you go into settings and restrict what they can and can't do. I mean, obviously those contracts that you sign are very vague, but once you download the app, you can get into the settings and really just allow them to be a part of certain things like tracking or something like that. But when it go into looking at your pictures and your cell phone contacts and things like that, it gets a little very very intrusive to my at least I would think so.
You mentioned in the note that you sent me about this earlier that you had seen things on social media. I've heard from our compliance department before about this very problem. How widespread is this at this point? How big of a problem are we talking about?
Well, apparently it's being used more and more by these companies. They sign contracts. These companies do with other apps, or they have their own apps, and it's just data mining. It's just data mining. They're getting more information off you, and also the logistics of loads and things of that nature, and they're just data mining this stuff. And it's doing no good for the industry, it really is, because what they'll do is they'll see how many trucks are a certain area, if it's flatbeds or refrigerated, and they know what they can set the rates at. So they set the rates lower and lower all the time based on data they have available to them. And it's just getting worse and worse for the industry. It really is.
Well, I know there was another topic you wanted to talk about today, and I want to get to that. A bill in California that hits on two important national trucking issues. Doug, the bill is SB 961 there in California. What did the bill say when it was originally introduced?
Yeah, originally it was introduced by Senator Wiener in California that all trucks registered in California or manufactured in California would have to have side ride under ride guards, and it would have to have a retrofit to it because there was no exemption or grandfathering and all these other trailers. So, it was very, the bill was flawed from the get-go. The bill also had in there about speed limiters for all vehicles based on GPS and the speed limit in that area, and no vehicle, a vehicle would be notified of doing over 10 miles per hour, and that they could actually take enforcement on those vehicles. Yeah, fortunately for us, I mean, we opposed this bill right from the get-go. We partner up with a lot of different associations out there, and we were able to get the underride guard information removed. The speed limiter is basically a pilot program, but there is also a requirement that starting in 2032, all vehicles manufactured that in California or running through California have to have this passive speed limiter system in there, which would notify the driver that it was going over 10 miles an hour. There's no requirement of charging anybody or anything like that, but it's a passive system. It's passed two committees. It's going on to the Appropriation Committee. I'm not sure if it'll pass this year, but it's something to look forward to in the future because, who knows, they may amend it back to putting other things in there. It's you never know with California. Several states, you never know. They throw things in the last minute.
You mentioned some other groups that had opposed this. Who are some of the other groups that stepped in with OOIDA to oppose this bill?
The National Motors Association. There are several trucking associations. I don't have the list in front of me, but it was a large conglomerate of people that were against this. Yeah, rightfully so, because it was bad legislation.
Okay. Well, Doug, we've run out of time, but I want to thank you very much for the information.
Sure thing.
I've been talking with OOIDA's Doug Morris. Now, folks, if you want to speak out on federal or state matters, you can call your representatives in Congress or the state legislature. To call any member of Congress, all you have to do is dial up the U.S. Capitol switchboard. That phone number is 202-224 3121. Provide the operator your zip code, and they can connect you directly to the office of your senators or your U.S. congressman. Again, that phone number is 202-224-3121. Meanwhile, if you want to write a letter to your members of Congress or contact state lawmakers about an issue closer to home, you can do that through the website fightingfortruckers.com. Just scroll down on the main page to where it says Find Officials and enter your zip code. The site will look up contact information for your elected representatives. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with more. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.